which you are demonstrating perfectly as an audience today. So thank you, and without any further delay, Stuart Baker, thank you.
Well, thanks, Dennis. So first, I'd like to just take a moment with Baba, if we can, in silence. Jai Baba. So again, welcome everybody, and in keeping with Baba's love of comedy, here we are in the back room. Judy said to me, "You're going to have a perfect situation to practice conscious cooperation here." So that's true, and we're honored to have two distinguished gentlemen here who were with Mayor Baba. Bill and Tom, great to have you both. And I said to Bill last night, if anybody's hoping to get some wisdom today, then I'm going to ask you to come up. So anyway, so a lot of you know me making sawdust, working on the center and on people's homes and so on. And some of you know, some of you don't know that there's this whole other part of my life which has to do with mediation. This thing I've developed I call conscious cooperation. I do some healing work. I've been highly trained and certified as a healer, which basically involves helping people to identify a real core troubling issue and then turn to the divine for guidance better than they've been telling their own selves, their own messages which aren't working for themselves. And I've really been able to combine all of this into, let's say, a pretty gifted existence with it, really. So, give you a little history. Just while working on this talk, while preparing, in the last couple of days, I realized at a deeper level how, for me, what I call conscious cooperation, I'll explain it, and mediation, my evolution with them, they're so integrally woven in with my journey with Mayor Baba. And so you're going to get a little bit of my Baba story today, which I wasn't planning on even yesterday. But when I realized this really profound connection for me, I said, well, I got to give a little bit of background. And for me, that starts as a 15-year-old high school kid, regular kid, very dissatisfied with life as presented to me, and especially by my mother, God bless her. And she had these edicts about life. Life is hard and unfair. The best we can hope for is to cope, and we can know nothing about God. Truth, that's it. And I said, God, that's bleak. I don't buy it. And she said, you're so naive. I'm trying to save you the trouble of finding out that I'm right. And I said, if you're right, something's really wrong with this whole thing. So it was just a night or two later, before I went to sleep, I was just laying in bed, and I didn't even know where this came from. And suddenly this urge came up, and I said, I'm going to take a wild chance that there's more. And again, I didn't know where this came from, what I asked for, but I said, I want three things. I want truth with a capital T. I want the divine truth. I want happiness with a capital H. I want to be profoundly happy, and I want to feel really good about myself. And I threw it up there. And a little something came back immediately. It was subtle. It was just a little bit, but I remember getting this deep breath as I went to sleep and thinking, well, maybe there's something else. And for the next couple of months, I went on this inner journey that eventually evolved into about a year where I kind of looked for this presence, something else, and this presence started to appear. It was a sensation and a light, an actual light. I closed my eyes and I could see light, and I was aware of this, all I can say is a presence. And after a while, days went by and I kept tuning in every night to the presence, and I became aware it was actually guiding me. Who's this presence? And after maybe 2 months or so, suddenly the presence said to me inwardly, I am the source, capital S, and I saw the letters inside my head. I said, okay, I can buy that. And another month or so went by, and life was expanding, the light was getting brighter, the presence was getting stronger, and I was taking it with me in my daily life. And then at night, I couldn't wait to get with this presence again. It was becoming my best friend. And then this one night, 3 or 4 months into this whole experience, this question came up in me, and I went, uh-oh. If I ask this, my life will forever be changed. I know it, but I have to ask it. And the question was, are you God? And I asked, and immediately the answer came back, I am none other. And I just lay there and I went, uh-oh, what if I opened? And I said, why me? I'm this 15-year-old kid. What do I know? And he said, don't ask, it's just meant to be. I said, what do I do? He said, you just pay attention to me. I said, that's it? He said, you pay attention to me and you follow me. I will guide you. I know you far better than you know yourself. I know everything you need before you can even think of it or ask. You just follow me. So it took some adjusting and a lot of inward releasing, but I did it, and he allowed me to do it. I have to say that. He allowed me to do it. And the light grew brighter, the presence grew stronger, and my awareness went from here to this ever-expanding arc, and eventually it went all the way behind me. And the presence was all around, all through me. The light got brighter and brighter. I have to say, the veil between me and God, as I experienced it, got thinner and thinner by His grace. And at one point, one night, He said, I'm nameless God. And I saw it in block letters inside. It was like a 5-dimensional marquee, nameless God. And wow, okay. Again, why me? I'm this kid, but I'm not knocking it, I'm signed on. And there was a give and take. So he taught me every night, and then the next day I had to apply what he taught me. And he taught me about love, about treating others well, about real happiness lies in making others happy. I wasn't talking to anybody, reading anything. I was in no group. I knew that this is my experience. I'm not supposed to try to communicate anything else. And I was so grateful that this was even happening. And he taught me to reach toward others, step out of my little comfort zone, start to set my ego I was used to aside. And I had to actually make a break from who I had been told I was by others, parents, other adults, what other kids thought of me, or who I thought I was. I had to make a firm break with that and let God show me who I really was and take me there. And there was one final tough letting go, but I made it, and I said to him, I'm going crazy, and he said, what you have been living was crazy. I'm giving you the truth. What do you want? You You want that? You want me? I said, well, I'll take you, all right? And I made that final release inwardly. And then these knots would come up in me. He'd bring them up. I became aware that he'd bring up these knots to wrestle with. And then I remember Darwin Shaw years later saying, he was standing on Maribot Hill and he was wrestling with this knot inside him, and Baba walked by and just took this thing from inside, and Darwin said, but the ego's so strong I still wanted to hold on to it. And I was still trying to grab it while Bob was pulling it out of me, but I identified with that, the knots. And so God would bring a knot up and I'd wrestle it, try to get under it, in it, around it, see my limitation with it. And they had to do with my judgments, fears, upsets over things, all my ego. And I'd wrestle the best I could, and then he'd take it. He would just take it. And I was that much lighter, brighter, more aware. I turned 16 years old. This kept going on. It kept expanding, and it became the most developed, calmest, most confident version of myself I'd ever been, way beyond my wildest dreams. And I was still in high school. And then at the height of the experience, eventually God revealed himself to me all around me, and others in nature, just all around me. And I became aware of the most painful knot that he hadn't fully revealed himself inside me. And that became extremely painful, really difficult. And then finally one day, just out of nowhere, my awareness was taken, right here, right under my heart. And there was this curved, golden, thick, double vault door here. And the door slowly opened, and there was this blazing light inside here. And this beckoning, come in. And I actually stepped inside here. And there was this just endless, soft, wonderful light, love, wisdom. It was everything. And God said to me, this is me. This is who I really am. This is who you really are. Formless. This is who everybody really is. They don't know it. They tell themselves they're somebody else, but this is it. And I remember in that moment, I could have died. I was fulfilled. I was 16 years old. And I remember thinking, I can die. But I also had said to him, I know this is not just for me. What do I do with this? And I remember saying, should I work in a mental hospital or something when I get older? What do I do with this? And I also said, I know I haven't earned this young lifetime. I have not earned all this in my 16 years. And he just said, don't ask, you'll find out what to do. That was it. And he trained me not to ask. So, all right. So eventually my worst nightmare happened was that this came to an end. Agonizingly, honestly. But it took like about 3 years of just it all being taken away, to the point that I actually felt I'd gone backwards. I had no connection with God. I physically felt horrible. I mentally felt horrible. I was unrecognizable to myself. I had just become this, barely a shell of this inspired 16-year-old kid who I was. And finally at 20, I said, I got to do something. I got sick and tired of being sick and tired, as they say in 12-step. And I said, all right, I'm really tired of myself. God doesn't seem to be there. I got to do something. And I actually started training myself to go off for the football team in college. And I said, I know it's kind of dumb, but it's a focus, and it was good. It was physical, very physical, and I focused on it. So that December 1970, Christmas break from college, got a phone call. A friend of mine said, our friend Steve wants to tell us about Meher Baba tonight. And I said, have you heard of Mayor Bob? And I said, no. So Steve was telling us about Mayor Baba, and all of a sudden, and I had become cynical. I hated God's guts. He didn't exist for me. He really didn't exist. I mean, I could not connect at all, like had been. It was over. But I realized suddenly, while Steve was talking, that in spite of myself, I was smiling uncontrollably. And all of a sudden, my awareness went right back here. There was the same double vault golden doors, and they opened, and Mayor Baba was standing inside me, alive, about 40 years old, and he just beckoned me in. And I went inside, and he said, do you remember Nameless God? And you could have knocked me over with a feather, because I had not told anybody. I buried that in myself. I said, yeah, why? And he said, that was me. And in that instant, there was no question. Nobody else could have asked me that. Nobody could have said it. There's no question who he was. There's never been a question since. I said, what do I do? He said, well, now it's your turn to work your way back to me. I said, okay, how do I do that? And he went like this, and he said, good luck. And he turned and he walked away. And I said, I think, quote, are you freaking kidding me? That's it? Good luck? You know? I said, you son of a gun. But he put a drop in my heart. He left a drop in my heart, and it was just enough to get me going again. And I threw myself in. So that was December 1970. Found the Baba Group in Boston. Summer of 1971, had my first visit here. November, ended up in India for my first time. And anyway, that God training me as a teenager, do your best to be helpful, to be kind, to be loving. Set aside your own ego, but don't be a doormat either. You know, that training, the urge was left in there. The training was inescapable. I couldn't forget it. It had been taken into my core. So when I first lived here in the 70s, you know, I did things like worked with community volunteer services in the black ghettos. Worked with John and Mary Leiter for a year and a half. Denny came down for a few months and worked with me. And then I became an addictions counselor in Horry County and got certified in that. And lived here almost 6 years, and eventually things just folded up. And I used to say, if Baba wants me to leave here, he's got to kick me out of here. And he really did. Things just folded up. All these doors are shut, and we felt like we were being kicked out. So we left. I had a family then, yeah. And went back up toward Boston, Boston area where I was raised, and I was looking into graduate school. Didn't really want to do that. Didn't feel good about it, but I was looking in. Got a phone call. An old Baba friend said, would you like to help me with some carpentry and painting? I'm too busy. So I started to help him, and one thing led to 10 others, and ended up getting renovation work on Cape Cod, 1980. Got Don McBride to join me and work with me, and he stayed there several years with me. And to my utter surprise, I ended up having a 28-year career in construction on Cape Cod that then followed me to Virginia, met Danusha, and then back here, and I'm still making sawdust. But in that journey, and this is where the conscious cooperation really comes in, the mediation, I was always drawn toward harmony. Disharmony bothered me, conflict bothered me. And if customers were upset, I really wanted to know why, what happened. If there was discord with a subcontractor. What's going on? I became a student of conflict, and I meditated on these things, and I learned a few key things. Clarity, be as clear as you can be. Listen deeply, ask a lot of questions. Be more ready to listen than to get out what you want to get out. And like with customers, make sure they really understand things. Double check, are you satisfied with this? Are you happy about this? Do you have any questions? And because I used to hear a lot of statements from people in construction say things like, oh, every customer wants to take advantage of you. You can't trust them. And then I hear other customers say, oh, you can't trust the contractors. And I'd say, right, I don't like this. I don't think it has to be like this. So short story is I learned to work in this consciously really cooperative, collaborative way, where I really want people to be happy. I want my customers to really be happy. I want to do great work, high quality work. But I learned to have conversations like with potential customers, even repeat ones. I'd say, okay, so we've gone over a lot of details about the project, and we've written things down. Are you really happy with it? How do you feel about it? And first I'd get them kind of looking at me and say, no, are you excited about this? Do you think this is going to change your life doing this project? And I'd say, do you have any fears about doing this? And do you have any horror stories about construction from your own background, your neighbors, your parents, and you get people looking at me, and I'd say, do you trust me? Do you feel like I'm really on your side? And then every time I had this conversation, people would eventually go, oh, they take this deep breath, and they'd lean toward me sitting in conversation, and they'd say something like, we feel so safe. We never expected to have any conversation like this. We can't wait to get going. This is phenomenal, We had no idea. And I said, oh, that's great, and I want you to be really happy at the end. I want us to have excellent communication along the way, because that's really important. If you have questions, bring them up, please. You can keep an eye on me, because I'm human too. I take a lot of notes, and I try to do everything right, but I'm human, Ended up having customers say to me, call your wife, we'll have dinner together. Just have her come over, or we'd go out and do things together. Come sailing with us, and guys working with me would say, how do you do this stuff? This isn't normal relationships with customers. And customers chase you to hand you money. How do you do that? It's usually hell to collect money, and they say, do you need more money? I say, it's important to me to take real good care of them, and to really nurture the relationship, this all-important working relationship together. So for me, stories are really important. So I just described part of the conscious cooperation. And the first time I remember taking a leap into practicing this was years ago. Don and I were building a new home, and our electrician had sent this guy who worked for him to do electrical work. And the guy was just sour. He carried this black cloud around with him, and he complained about everything. And I came that close to calling his boss and just saying, get rid of him and send us somebody else. He's a jerk. Can't stand him. But I didn't, and this little tap on the back of the neck said to me, let's try something else. Let's try setting your ego aside, your dislike of this guy. And I said, but wait a minute, I'm justified. He's acting like a jerk. And the voice said, I know, but just try this. Try reaching toward him. So I went over to him and I said, are you all right? Come tiny. So can I do anything to help you? I said, well, look, I want to make your experience here good. So if there's anything I can do, I want you to tell me, all right? If I can help your job. And I said, I'm going to the lumber yard. You want a cup of coffee or something? And he stopped and he looked at me and he said, no, but thanks. And the whole thing lifted in me and I said, I'm onto something. This was a long time ago, it's a lot of years ago. And then I kept stretching that to like letting guys know frequently how grateful I was they were there, how much I valued them, valued their work. And honestly, I came to have an image that we were like big elves in Santa's workshop, kind of merrily working along together. Everybody was talented, my customers loved us. We helped one another. I'd be carrying lumber and the plumber would say, hey, let me give you a hand with that. Okay. And the plumber would say, can you help me carry a bathtub in? Yeah, sure. And whoever was going out would say, I'll make a coffee run, and had these brothers, they had a roofing and siding crew, and one of them said to me, we love working for you because you're so fussy, and your customers love you, we love coming to your jobs. And I'd hear this, I'd say, well, I love having you, this is wonderful. And then I had both customers and subcontractors say to me, you gotta bottle and sell what you're doing, because nobody expects this in construction, of all things, the world of construction. And it's so delightful and it works. You really should do something with this. And first I said, oh, thank you. And then I kept hearing it and I said, all right, maybe I should actually do something with it. So starting about 20 years ago, I started writing, started taking a bunch of training, eventually wrote a book, Conscious Cooperation, How to Create Successful Construction Projects, and it's a how-to of what I've been talking about. Also, a lot of stories in there, and interviews with, honestly, some of the top mediators in the world who I got connected with, people in construction, one of my customers. But it's really like a spiritual approach to construction and to any working relationship. So a couple of other examples. I think my favorite one, I had this big multi-$100,000 renovation job. The architect literally changed things every day until I said, you can't do this anymore. I gotta finish the job, and I have a bigger job to get to. Very intense job. Everybody was busy, the industry was busy, had people all scheduled right along. Took a lot of effort on my part, and I also kept the tool belt on. I did not like just being a manager. So this Friday before Christmas, cold out, it's Cape Cod, and a bunch of carpenters, electricians, and this one plumber. And the plumber came from the biggest company in town. And all of a sudden he blew. And he smashed his tools down into the floor, and he got up and he said, I quit. I can't work here anymore. There's too many guys around me. I hate my boss. I'm gonna quit him anyway. Might as well quit now. And everybody stopped. Everybody's looking. And I looked up toward the heavens and I said, are you serious, Barbara? I said, do I really need this now? And the guy kept fuming and everybody's looking, and I went, oh God. And I said, all right, Barbara, let's go. And I went over and I said, what's happening? He said, all these guys are in my way and I can't work like that. And I hate my boss. I might as well just quit. And I put my hand on him. I said, come on, let's get a little privacy. And I just said to him, get it out. Just get it all out. And he did. And how his boss didn't really appreciate his work. And he was this tough, muscular guy. I thought he was actually going to tear the house apart. And he said, I want to do quality work, and he wants me to get everything done yesterday, and I can't work like that. And he said, I'm a mess working for this guy. I'm feeling violent, you know, I'm angry. And I said, I'm really sorry he's treating you like that. You know, is there anything else you want to say? He said, no, not really. And I said, well, I'm really sorry. I said, I know your boss, he's a piece of work. And I said, I want to tell you my end of it now, okay? I've heard your end of it. I'm depending on your great work, because if I lose you now, if you quit now, I'm screwed. I said, everybody's busy. The schedule on this job is going to go back 3 weeks, 4 weeks. I've got a bigger job to get to. I'm screwed, honestly. So I'm going to ask you to consider something, all right? Will you consider finishing my job? I'm going to pull this out.
That's finishing the job.
Thanks. So I said, would you consider finishing my job, then quit your boss after that? And he said, I'll go and have a cigarette, I'll think about it. And he went out, it's like 26 degrees out, he's in a t-shirt, he's having a cigarette, and the whole time I just repeated Bob's name and just looked at Bob. And the door opened, and immediately I just said, thank you, Baba, because you could feel there's this profound change in the guy, and he slowly, quietly walked up to me with his head down. And he came right up to me and he said, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry for the outburst. There's no excuse. It won't happen again, and I'll finish your job. And I said, I want to hug you. What can I do to help you? He said, no, I'll do my own work. I said, no, really, I'll drill holes for you. I'll fix the framing after you cut it. And he said, no, I'll do my own work. That's my job. I said, I'll keep everybody away from you. I said, guys, stay away from him. And I said, if I could do anything, you let me know, all right? You come to me. He said, okay, I will. And he was a gentleman. He did beautiful work. He actually did wonderfully neat work. He actually laughed at some of the jokes going around. And my customer on the job witnessed a good bit of the explosion in my conversation with the guy. And he's this big Austrian guy, sportsman. He was a mountain climber, skilled skier, great athlete, and imposing guy. And afterwards he came up to me, he said, I don't know how you do what you do, these guys freak me out. And I said, Ron, he just needed to be listened to. And once I heard him and he got it out, then I just needed to tell him my end of it and what I was hoping for. He said, I still don't know how you do what you do. And it was profound, you know. I learned later I was really kind of doing what's called nonviolent communication, Marshall Rosenberg's methodology, where you listen compassionately and then you say your end of it, you know, clearly, and you state, yeah, Tim. And I later studied nonviolent communication. But anyway, along the way too, I was told I was a natural mediator and I should take mediation training. So eventually I did, had wonderful initial training on Cape Cod, which was a revelation. It really helped change my life even more. And anyway, so I bring the spirit of conscious cooperation, the deep listening, and the training in mediation into being a mediator, and also just being me, you know. And I feel that's who Baba's created in me, you know. It's kind of who he's trained me to be in this lifetime. And you know what this means for me. And I've never been somebody who could like just go to Baba meetings, go to the center, read the books, and work at something, anything to make a living and just focus on Baba. My work's always had to have meaning for me and have Baba with me in the work. But my work's always had to have meaning for me, so my daily existence from getting up to going to bed, for me has to have meaning with Baba. And at this point, I do have to feel that now this is full circle 50 years later from the 16-year-old kid saying to God, what do I do with this? I know this isn't just for me. So I think it's my version of what can I do with it. And I'll tell you a couple of mediation stories, because again, the stories just mean so much to me. So I got asked quite a while ago would I want to be involved in a divorce mediation. And I wasn't specifically trained in divorce mediation, but I knew that this couple had done a lot of the legal work already, but they were at this utter loggerhead. They couldn't even talk to each other, and months had gone by. And I felt like I could work with their hearts. And anyway, we did. And what I like to do if I'm in mediation, I did it with them. I said, I want to start any session with a dedication to the divine. If it's, again, like I said at the beginning, Mayor Baba, Jesus, Buddha, higher power, I don't care. Truth, whatever it is. And I want to sit in dedication and ask that highest power to flood in, guide us, inspire us. And I've just seen so many amazing things, and that couple came to resolution. They hugged each other and carried through their divorce. They needed to get divorced, but it carried through. And another story, I did a lot of court mediation on Cape Cod, and one of the stories was a woman, she had a company do flooring work in her new condominium. The owner of the flooring company had been her deceased son's best friend. And they screwed up the job, and the owner of the company, her deceased son's former best friend, ignored the woman. He wouldn't take care of her, and he sent other people out. And the woman finally took him to court. And she said to the mediators in private conversation, she said, I don't want to be here in court. It's not really about the money, but it's the point of what took place. He was my son's best friend, and he's treating me like dirt, and this hurts too much, and this is really why I'm here in court. And so in private, we talked to the general manager of the company was there, and he brought a troubleshooter installer with him. It was to me Mr. Colombo. Mm-hmm. But the manager of the company was stonewalling, and he said, well, yeah, we should give her some money back. No, I'm not going to give her money. And we said, remember who your boss was, her son's best friend. Is this really what you? And finally, Colombo, the installer, he said, could I say something? Is it okay? Yeah. And he turned to the manager, his boss. He said, do you mind if I say something? He said, no, go ahead. And he said, boss, he said, you could win this battle with her, but you're going to lose the war. And the war is you're going to lose this woman and leave a terrible taste. Morally, you got to write the full check. You really do. And the manager just said, okay. And it was settled, and this humble installer, he turned back to the mediators. He said, was that all right? Was that all right I did that? I said, you were phenomenal. Are you kidding? You're the guy that broke this thing open, So like Danusha says to me, you never know who your allies are. But it was a wonderful story, This thing got healed in a sense. The woman ended up feeling better. And I've just seen so many situations of people having been stuck in their own egos, able to have that open up a bit, get into their hearts more, and find a way to come together. So Tanusha said to me, why don't you give people who come something to take away? So you got about 35 years of my supposed wisdom on a page and a half here. Yeah, so anyway, what came to me, I wrote up, and I'll hand these all out, but it's tips for effective and empathetic communication. So should I read it out first?
Yeah.
Okay, number one, listen. It's underlined. Above all else, listen with your heart, without bursting to get out what you want to say, and without having a running judgment carrying on in the background. In the words of trainer and spiritual healer James Keeley, what is it like to be them? What's it like to be that other person? If you can really listen to someone with deep interest and sincerity, you can open new worlds of communication for yourself and for the other person. This even holds true in conflict, and even especially if you have faith that the divine or higher power or whatever form of higher truth that you may subscribe to resides within everyone as their very core, always there behind whatever veil of ego is present. Listening with your heart can disarm the other person and help them feel safe and really heard. While it can also take you inside them and expand your world. There's an old saying that we have one mouth and two ears for a reason. We're supposed to listen twice as much as we speak, and I love it. Number two, underline, ask questions. Ask questions for clarification. Ask questions for greater understanding, and then listen as openly as you can to the responses. The more open you can be to the responses, the more you may learn and be surprised. Sometimes just listening deeply to the answers, or in quotes, their end of things, can dissolve conflict in itself and the root of misunderstanding or assumption or judgment. You know, and I'm sure you've all experienced that. Sometimes you just quietly let somebody get it out, whatever it is, and they say, geez, I feel better. You know, and maybe conflict just kind of melted away. It can be magical. Number three, be careful of judgments and assumptions. And this is huge too. It's so easy to carry judgments and assumptions. I say they can be deadly, and they're so easy to form. Well-known trainer Byron Katie has a mantra question: do you really know that to be true? You know, and how often do we say, oh, well, you know, these people are like that, or this person always X. And again, it's so easy to be sure that you're right in judgments and assumptions and not even see we're making them. You know, so it's a subtle thing, but it's just so powerful. 4, careful listening and questioning in themselves, done from a place of genuine curiosity, can slow down the mind. And this is where God took me as a teenager. My mind slowed down as He revealed His reality more and more. And slow down the mind and open the heart to experience the other person in a completely different way. It's just a quantum difference. And again, I'm sure you've all experienced this in one way or another. Number 5, it's not all just about the facts, in quotes. My facts and your facts about the same thing can be very different. And we find this in mediation. You know, my God, so many times, but if 2 people say what happened, and then, you know, like if it was joint mediation, we'd have the parties involved leave the room and we'd say, were they really at the same place? You know, these stories are so disparate, so far apart. And then what often happens is, again, it's not so much about the facts as the opportunity to let go of something and take a step toward coming together in a different kind of way. And that is magical. So I say there's so much room for interpretation, coloring, and personal experience. Even if the facts are agreed upon, very often there's an emotional truth at a deeper level that is not specifically about the details. It is very often at least as much or more about what an event or supposed detail means to someone. You know, again, not so much what happens as what it does to you, what it means to you, what you tell yourself with it. And even if their interpretation is really quite skewed or greatly colored, it's still what it means to them. Number 6, state what is true for you clearly and succinctly. And if this is done after listening well to the other person, better yet. You know, in my story about listening to that wild plumber that time, you know, and I said, just get it out. I said, okay, did you get it out? Let me tell you my end of it. You know. Number 7, really try not to make what you say an attack. You know, and that's a big deal. There's no better way to close communication and put someone on the defensive than to shout at them and say something like, well, you always, you know, whatever it is, or you did this, or your people do that, you know, and no better way to close communication and close hearts. And like Baba said, why do people yell at each other? Because their hearts are so far apart. They have to get louder to try to connect. And when you're really connected, he said, so you look at lovers when they're really so connected and their voices are soft and they're just close together. And the last thing, importantly, have an intention for successful communication. Intention can be a silent yet powerful force that steers toward the light. And I find this is huge. So whether I'm doing construction work, mediation, healing work, whatever it is, I say, Baba, please flood in. May I be the best of me. You know, would you come through me and guide me? And I picture an excellent outcome, you know, whatever the thing is. So I guess pretty much, I think that's my piece. And any questions or comments?
I wanted you to tell that story about the family where there
Ken?
was the family where there was this disagreement.
Yeah.
This is so
Okay.
it's
Yeah.
so.
So this guy Ken Cloak is in California. He's my biggest hero in the whole field of mediation, and he ended up making himself really available to me. I'm very blessed for that. So one of his stories, and he was a judge. He was a state judge, attorney, and I said to him, how did you go from being a judge? I took a lot of training from him. How did you go from being a judge to doing this? And he said, I concluded that justice was not being served in the legal system. And he said, where it's at is the heart. And so one of his books is called Mediating from the Heart. And he said, the action is in the heart, from the heart, that's where it is. And he and his wife actually teach this internationally. So one of his stories is this woman called him. She said, I'm one of 4 grown siblings. We're all 50-something. Our family is in such a rift. It's been my dream that we could come together before our parents die. We have grandchildren who've never met one another because the family's so broken apart. So I got my brothers to agree to come to you, brothers and a sister. And would you see us? And he said, sure, yeah. So he sat them together and he said, so does anybody remember where this started? And everybody pointed to these two brothers and said, yeah, with them. And he said, is that true? And the younger brother said, yeah. He said, well, what happened? He said, well, when I was 4 years old, my older brother took scissors and cut out animal shapes in the living room drapes when our mother wasn't there, and then when she came home, he blamed me, and I've never forgiven him ever since, and I've lost all respect for him. 4 years old. He said, oh yeah, and he also broke my kite. And Ken looked at the older brother and he said, is this true? said, I don't remember. I'm sorry, I don't remember. And Ken said, well, let's say it's true. He said, what's the only thing you can say to your brother? He said, I'm sorry. He said, well, would you say it to him? So he turned to him and he said, I'm really sorry. Ken said to the younger brother, he said, does that do it for you? And he said, no. He said, oh, what would you like? He said, I want him to buy me a kite. They're 50-something years old. And Ken says, wonderful. He says to the older brother, he says, will you buy him a kite? He said, sure. Ken said, great. And he said, no, wait a minute. Buy two. I want you two to fly them together. And the two brothers walked out of there with their arms around each other. I mean, this was astounding stuff. I mean, I'm getting choked up telling you the story. And but it was just reminding me of one more that was as profound, but now my old brain. Anyway, but yeah.
So that's the kind of mediating that you can do.
Well, that's yeah. So Ken, in the first training I took with him, there's only about 28 people in the room. This is phenomenal. And about an hour in, he said, where it's at is in the heart. He said, you're not going to get this anywhere else. So it's not in any other mediation training. And he said, I'm going to take you into an exercise now to see if you can tune into the other person's heart. And so he said, now I want you to break into triads, 3 people. One is the client with the issue, and you're role playing. One's the mediator, one's the observer. And he said, and you playing the client, I want you to be somebody difficult in your life. So this woman played her boss, and she was like this, and we're questioning her, and then and Ken said to us, he said, now you're going to find, he said, if you really get into what I call the zone, he said, your voice is going to lower and you're going to lean toward each other. And just as Baba said, the heart's coming together. He said, you're in the zone if that happens. So I got tuned in with this woman playing her boss, and what was it like in his childhood, where this pain come from, and all of a sudden the woman went like this, and I looked at her arms and her deep breaths she took, and we got through the mediation. When it was over, I said, when you dropped your arms and you took that deep breath, did you do that deliberately? She said, no. She said, that was totally natural. And she said, for the first time in 7 years of working for my boss, I get him. By role-playing him just now and feeling that, and being able to let go. I get him like never before in 7 years of full-time work for the guy. And she and I were so excited with what took place. We got together at lunchtime to try to go back and take it further. So anyway, it's profound for me, and with Baba to really consciously try to work in the heart, be aware of hearts, be sensitive to people. It's very important to me. So I think maybe that's it.
Thanks.
Zeba. Any questions, comments?
Did you have any books?
Do I have books? Yeah. I do. Yeah. And Ken.
Well, it's great that you started with your own personal story. I know you didn't want to do that, but that just made it a complete picture. So I think it was very effective and successful that you started at 15 years old and talking to us.
Well, thanks. And I know that you know the story. I know that you've heard it, but it was like boing yesterday. I said, wait a minute, I have to give a piece of that to tie this whole thing together. It didn't happen in a vacuum. So, yeah, thanks, Ken. All right, I guess.
Anyway.
Yeah.